Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 576th episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm your host, Mason Jordan, my co host, Abe Stein,
That's me.
and my other co host, Spencer Hallen.
Yo, 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 what's up?
And today we are going to be talking about fearless magic inventories, taking accountability for this and kind of working through it. It's something that we've talked a lot about on the podcast, but we've had a lot of questions from listeners and sort of being like, what is this? And so we just thought this is worth dedicating a whole nother episode to. I think we did one back when Abe first started on the podcast about 3-ish years ago now at this point. And we're revisiting it, but we're doing it a different way this time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what a fearless magic inventory is right now, why we think it's so important, and then we're going to do a mini one with y'all to give you a real example of sort of what yours could be looking like. Because I don't know about you guys, but in coaching, when this comes up, it is something that people really struggle with until I think they kind of get some examples and kind of talk it out. And the other thing they struggle with is sort of being self-reflective on their good. And I think that's going to be one of the big things we're going to focus on today is if you're doing a fearless magic inventory correct, your goods and bads should not be disproportionate. You know what I mean? Like if you've been playing magic for a bit, it should not be like 99 bads, 1 good. There are things you're good at and there are things that you're improving at. And we should talk about this. But Abe, you're someone who I think really championed this, really taught me about this. And so what is a fearless magic inventory?
Yeah, so fearless magic inventory actually comes from this is from the ancient text. This is from a Star City article I read when I was in high school. But basically, it is an exercise of really taking the time to reflect on where you think you are strong and weak in magic, and where your skills need to improve for you to get better, and also where you think you have strengths. um, so that you can be honest with yourself and start from a place of, okay, this is where I'm not meeting my standard or not meeting my expectations where I need to be in order to have the success I want, so that you can then focus in on work on those things. And ideally, I mean, sharing it with others so that they can hold you accountable to the things that you want to do better. Having be it teammates or people at your LGS you play with, or friends online who you play with in Discord, whatever it is, letting them know, this is where I think I need help and need to develop, and keeping that in mind, can you call out if you're watching me play a match at our local or at our RCQ, that you thought I did a bad or good job of this, so that way I can know and we can talk about that. So it's really just a good way to set a baseline for yourself and kind of write down and record what is it that where you currently are and what is it you're working on, so that you can actually make progress and have that kind of accountability from others as well.
Yeah. And this might seem like something that maybe you're like, oh, I don't need to do this, or oh, I'm pretty good at doing a self inventory of those things, or I feel pretty confident about what I need to work on, or maybe what I'm already good at. But what I would challenge you, and as we go into this today, to think about and to try doing with this is really being open and honest about it and being very vulnerable about both your strengths and weaknesses and putting it down. And like Abe said there, sharing it with someone you really trust, right? Lots of Magic players have that like one friend they're very close with, right? That they play a lot of tournaments or they talk to maybe just a little bit more than someone else. You have favorites, right? Share that with someone, and sort of be like, hey, this is kind of a thing where I'm at, blah, 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 blah. And like Abe said, being accountable and open, this is really good. And the nice part about this is you have this in theory for forever. When we were doing today's episode, guys, I went and pulled up this document that Abe and I worked on back in 2023. And I kind of, I've been updating it and slowly kind of, chipping away and changing. And I pulled the things from there and just pasted them here, because this is something that I have and I can keep with me. And I look back on, what, I have improved at these things. And sometimes also I've deteriorated at these things, right, Spencer? It's kind of the constant grind.
Yeah, I think the constant grind is a truth. And I also think that talking to my personal person, as Mason mentioned, Matt Kling, former host of the show, there is sometimes a lack of this. Like maybe this is your weakness. Maybe this is the thing that you need to work on. Is this self-evaluation? because I think that self-evaluation is a skill in its own, and you can't learn it until you do it. And that's kind of the conversation I had with Matt today. Is like, hey, like, what do you think I'm good at? What do you think I'm bad at? And then he's like, I could not have answered these questions for myself. What do you think of me? And we had like a pretty good conversation about like, hey, like, I'm sorry that you can't do this, but have you tried to do it? Like, have you put in the work to understand yourself? And self-reflection is it's hard. Like, it's not like an easy thing. And I don't think that any of us are going to sit here and pretend that we're good at it, or I mean, maybe we'll pretend we're good at it, but like, we're not the best that we could be at self-reflection, because it is a hard skill.
Yeah, I mean, I think a quote that I heard a while ago that I really resonated with me is like, the emotion of feeling uncomfortable is one that people underexplore and underdevelop, right? And I think, the real takeaway from that quote is, right, is like, we avoid the feeling of like, ooh, I don't feel good about this, or I feel odd, or I feel awkward, right? And really embracing that and kind of, being like, well, why is this way? And reflecting on those things is something that I think is super valuable and super important.
I think that can work both ways too, right? Like, you might not feel comfortable patting yourself on the back like, I'm good at this thing. And that they're both part of self-evaluation, as I think you said a couple minutes ago, Mason, of like, yeah, you have to be able to be honest with yourself, like, I am good at this thing.
Yeah. It's funny, anecdotally, in my league coaching, there was this girl who's in the program with me, and she had this insane early game. I mean, she dropped like 10 kills, did everything perfect, minus one small mistake. And, after the game, she was like, oh, I played that early game like dog, and we were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You were actually like smurfing, it looked like, why are you in this program? And like, yeah, your late game, you like really messed up, but your early game was good. And she's like, no, it wasn't. And we're like, well, pull up the VOD and watch it. And then she watched it and she was like, oh my God, I did really good. But she never reflects on those. She doesn't watch them a bunch, right? And, this is sort of something that, I thought was funny because this literally happened last night as I'm thinking about this Fearless Magic inventory of like, there are so many people who probably think something really negative, and in reality, it's like actually quite good. I had it happen in coaching today too, where a client, kind of said something like, they said, I know this sounds dumb, and then gave me the perfect answer. And I'm like, you just said it in a way that's like not very elegant. That's totally right. Like, it's okay. And I think in general, we're really hard, and it's hard to reflect on these sort of things. But we've done a lot of yapping about, what is a Fearless Magic inventory and why you should care. But let's just hop into it. And I'd like us all start with our positives and kind of, take turns talking about those. And then we're going to work on the things that we need to work on. And for what it's worth, that's how I list this in my personal inventory. I don't know how Abe does it exactly, but I call it, things that we've improved at and things that we're working on, right? You can look at them as positive and negatives, but I kind of view it as like, this is something I'm working to eliminate. I'm working to improve at. And maybe I can never truly eliminate it, but I can get better at it. And so I guess I'll just pop in here first, as it is in our show notes. Thinking through the whole turn is one of the things that I think I've gotten even better at with time. And it's something I really preach in coaching about. Just like, when my turn starts, I think through everything I want to do, have a rough plan for the next turn that's, malleable, and then I sort of execute on it. And it really just helps reduce like the missing of little things like a bobble trigger or missequencing, a bobble in a fetch land. It's not because, I think through it all perfectly the first time. It's because I'm thinking, and then like halfway through the process, I'm like, oh, I should have bobbled, then fetch, and not fetch bobble, because I actually don't need the mana. I could do it this way. Little things like that. That has helped me a ton, and it's led to so many less small errors. And small errors really are like a make or break point, way more than people think.
I know the answer to this, but like, because you were a listener of this podcast before you were a host and the coach and stuff, but like, this is based off of the PV method of Magic, right?
Yeah, totally. I learned this from Paulo Vitor Damarosa. I remember he, I think, wrote an article and talked on the podcast about it. I feel like I first heard it on the podcast, but time is an illusion.
I think you actually wrote the article after he came on the podcast. So
sure, okay, yeah, that's totally believable. I also too, like, the CC timeline is so weird for me because I binged a bunch of episodes in the past when I was like catching up. But yeah, like this is where I first heard that. And it was something that was really, important. And it's something that I think I was good at like, 3 years ago. And I've only gotten better and more efficient with time. And part of the reason I picked this one from my list of good things is to actually highlight what you're talking about, Spencer. I've been working on this skill since the release of Hour of Devastation. I almost said Rise of Amonkhet, but Hour of Devastation is when I remember first really trying to do this. And guys, that's like I believe a 2017 set. That's 8 years of me honing this skill and really working on it, right? Like it is something that's taken a lot of time, and I've been good. I'm better now, and hopefully I'm even better in the future at it.
I think that even weirder is like right now is like an optimal time for this skill. It's I know that people don't want to talk about standard, they don't want to talk about the best deck, but like this is actually really important with VV Cauldron for like mapping out like what your turn and their next turn looks like for how you're using your mana while you're using it. It's actually like the thing that's going to win you an RCQ, both in the mirror and just overall.
Yep. Next, I have knowing when to push and knowing when to hold, and I kind of put especially versus control, and sort of the idea of like committing more resources, or have I committed enough? Can I do alternate things with my mana, right? Like I think a good example of this from a year ago is like, do I play this thing or do I hold up my Fairy Mastermind activation, and kind of knowing like, oh, I do need to play this because I need to, beat these cards and push the game over, or I'm in a good spot. I'm going to hold up a Fairy Mastermind, maybe make them think about some interaction that I don't have, blah, 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 blah. I think that's a skill that I feel really good at and something that I've gotten better with at time. And then the last one here I have is good prep process when doing it. And this is originally I had these in reverse order. But one of the things I'm going to talk about when we get to the negatives is sort of like a lack of motivation at certain points. But when I do prepare, I feel really happy with my process. I feel really good about it. Not only do I feel like I'm getting pretty good to great results with it, but it feels satisfying and it feels rewarding. Preparing recently for the Team Pauper event I played. Well, it was Pauper Legacy Standard, but I was the Pauper seat. I put a bunch of time into Pauper. I played that Pauper like 2K a couple months ago, played a little bit more of it, but when I found out there was another event with friends, I really didn't want to let my boys down. And I got two of my old friends who don't play as much anymore. And guys, the operation was to trick them into playing more Magic. We get the dub, they're back on the grind. And so I went hard on preparing for Pauper. I tweeted about it. I had a really great process, I felt like, and I kind of do what I felt like I tell my clients to do in coaching, and it just felt really good, and like it's something that I spend a lot of time in learning how to prepare for events. And this is something that I feel like I was not always good at, but I recently feel kind of confident enough to move it to that good category. This used to be a thing where I was a little unhappy with how my process was. So kind of showing with time these things improve and we get them from not happy to happy. If there's something you all want to say about it, I'll pass it on over to you, Spencer.
Well, I just want to say like congratulations. Like I think process is so important. And I'll actually just change mine to start with it. I think that I'm very good at building a personal process. This is something that I think that people struggle with. And you guys talked about it a lot on last week's episode. Like, mostly because you talked about it on Amulet Titan. But people just struggle with the idea that you can build a process to learn a deck or an archetype or improve at something in Magic. And, one of the things that I challenge people in coaching a lot is like, let's put pen to paper. Like, what does it look like to improve at this skill? What do you think it looks like? What do you think the outcomes are? What do you think this is? What do you think that the steps are to achieve the outcome? That type of stuff. And I think that I not to toot Abe's horn. I think that Abe and I are very aligned in this part of Magic, where we see Magic this way, and we look at Magic this way, and this is one of the things that I have enjoyed the most in coaching, is like helping people like understand like how to build a process, or how to look at things from, okay, like you're trying to do X, like what is how do we get to X? And how does it have the outcome that you want? I think I'm very good at that. That's mostly through my job, though. I actually don't think I learned that through Magic. I guess I learned a lot of it through Pro Tour testing. But I think I mostly learned about it from my job.
Yeah, I think that is a really important skill. It's something that, you mentioned like the beginning part of it, of like listing it out in coaching. It's something I talk to a lot with people of like,
Yeah.
when there's something they don't know how to do or where to really start with it, before I kind of tell them what I might do, I always ask them, if I was a fly on a wall, what would your process look like? What would I see if I was hanging out?
It's actually really interesting to see what people think that X looks like, right? Like, what do you think? Like, you're saying you are bad at this thing, or that you respect players that do this thing. What do you think they're good at? And then having them write that out is always like an interesting thing. My next one is being open-minded. I feel like we are at an all-time low of open-mindedness in MTG. And I am always willing to look at anything that is you if you're 10-0 with a deck, let me know. I want to know. Like, I want to see it. And I think that like people are so fast to shut off things. And I think that this is a skill of mine to be like, I honestly, I'm just going to use VV as an example. This was a card that like I was really high on. And some of our patrons tried to talk me off of it. They were like, no, just dies to Doomblade type of argument. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, this seems really good. And I think that like I'm very open-minded in like strategies, decks, things like that. I think that is a skill of mine that I don't even know if it can be taught, other than like being more positive, like accepting that somebody did something good with something that you didn't expect, and then trying to learn from it.
I don't know how Abe feels about this, but I think it is something that can be taught. And I think I would just maybe word the way to get there a little differently, of like, it is being positive, but it's sort of focusing on like, what is the good about what is being presented, right?
Yeah.
So for example, a random example here, but like an elf deck in standard, right? I don't even know what it would look like, but if someone brought one to me, I'd probably start with like, well, why, like, what's the selling point of your deck? Like, what's the good? What's the broken or the strong thing you're doing? And I think so often people skip that step and immediately jump to the weaknesses. And it's important to evaluate both, right? Spencer, like, I think part of being open-minded is also understanding that not everything's gold, right? But it's kind of taking a second to see if it is fool's gold, where so many people would just kind of hand wave it.
Yeah, I think, Mason, to that point also, I mean, it's funny talking about positive and negatives, why we're doing this exercise, right? We're talking about our own, positives and negatives. But even, especially within Magic, like, back when I was writing for Star City, even wrote an article about, like, this is what the tier 2 standard decks look like right now. These are the decks that you can see 5-0ing or putting up challenge results, that are decks that like are not the best 2 to 3 decks in the standard format. Let's talk about why that might be, right? What are the cards or play patterns or whatever's going on in these that like you can learn from? And I put it that way, as like, they're that open-mindedness, that curiosity as to why is this thing that I would not expect happening is something you can absolutely learn. But I think it takes time, right? There's so much to both your points, right? There's so much, kind of incentive and default to say, well, that's not good. Like it's so much easier to say that that's not the best thing to do than to understand what that says about what the best thing to do could be, or, a potential, angle of attack to beat some of the best things, or like the weaknesses in the metagame, right? Like those are all things that you can learn just by taking the time to, consider and put value into all the information that you're presented with. And I definitely think it's a strength of yours, Spencer, for sure.
Well, thank you. My last one is was given to me. I talked to somebody close to me, and what's funny is I think this is a weakness of mine, and they think that it is a massive strength. So I put it on my strengths, and that is the dedication to learning a deck. I think I need this. The reason I say this is a weakness is like we'll get into it. We get into my weaknesses, but like I need this. But I am very good at once I understand a deck that like I know the deck, I know the matchups, I know the things, and I have the ability to. This is gonna sound crazy to some people. Like I could play 30 matches with a deck and I not get bored. Like I think that does not bug me. And for some people, like after their first 10 or 15 matches, they're like, all right, I'm done. Like I don't care anymore or whatever. I do not have that problem. I could play if I enjoy what I'm doing, I can do it forever. And that is the strength that this person says that I have. And to be honest, like it was surprising that this was their answer. That they thought that like not only did I do this, but like I gained something from match 30 like I did match 10. And that and for what it's worth, I think that this comes down to like I'm very good at tuning a deck list. Like if I care about something and I want the deck to be good, I'm very good at tuning. This has been true through my history of like building multiple decks for the qualified people for the Pro Tour, multiple state championship decks, like stuff like that. But like yeah, I think that like my dedication to learning a deck and archetype, its matchups, and like what the metagame looks like for it, is a strength of mine.
Great. Well, I'm interested to hear the second part and kind of fully get through that when the time comes. Abe, what about you?
Yeah. It's funny looking at this. I actually decided let me not just copy what I already had, but really just think what really resonates with me right now that I'm currently working on. Because I don't know if I pull that thing up. There's like probably 10 points under each at this point, at minimum. So, but the ones that I did pull for this episode are strengths, specifically identifying and like really understanding what games and matchups are about. This is something that I think it's funny. I played when I played Paul Green in a Breach Mirror at the RC in Portland. And I mean, I talked about this on the podcast. I kept this hand that was just like, well, it doesn't do anything really other than present a turn 3 kill, and I'm on the draw. So I'm just going to keep it because I think the matchup is only about, like in game 1, there's so few cards that matter. I will just play my Saga on 1 and hope that I win. And it worked, and it happened, and like the amount of things like that happen when I play, I think are like really high. Because I tend to, at a macro, understand what I'm trying to do in a matchup. Any given time I'm playing it, even on like low reps compared to others. And so that's something that is definitely, I think, a strength of mine. Like even when it comes down to like playing sealed or like draft or any format, like really breaking down or talking through a format like what is it when I'm playing this deck matters, and what is this matchup going to be about, like what are the actual points of interaction, or what are the strengths that I'm trying to play to, or things I'm trying to avoid. Like those are things that I think I have some of my biggest strengths in, especially compared to others. That's one.
I think you're underselling yourself. Like you're not even talking about like San Diego where you brought the secret deck that everybody brought, the the black red deck where you were so prepared for the black red mirror, like you wanted to play against it. Like you were so ready and understood the format so well. I think you're understanding yourself here. Like, you know, you're saying it's strength, but like it's like a super strength.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I think that if there's one thing that allows me to take as many shortcuts as I feel like I do sometimes in like preparation, it is this. Like this is the thing that I lean on the most. I think it's one of my biggest strengths is that it's very hard to make to confuse me with a matchup. Like there's very few times I'm not able to understand or grok it, and also, you know, then bring those findings back and work on them to find better plans, like in a more longer drawn out testing process. Which kind of segues well into my second thing I brought, which is just I think I've even gotten better at this over the last 2 to 3 years, is just learning and playing the best deck really well. Like for a while, I didn't even like think of this as a strength of mine, but it wasn't until I was talking with my friend Joel about like, you know, what like just about this actually, like what he thought my strengths and weaknesses were. And one thing he said was like when he started playing, he was like, I hated playing the best deck. And like playing competitively for years, I would refuse to play the best deck because I just didn't like doing it. And you've never been one to do that, is what he said to me. It was like, you've always just been like, sure, there are times you don't play the best deck because you believe in a deck, but like you will just pick up the best deck and you will play it as best as you can. And I mean, that is something that not every player gives themselves the opportunity to do, or like, you know, you have to give yourself credit for that. And I think that even I look at all of my Pro Tour qualifications I've earned, all of them have been with the undisputed best deck in the format that they're in. All of them, including playing them extremely well and understanding the matchups that were most important for them. Like those two things combined, I think really are like the core of my success. In part because I continue to focus on being able to do them. Like I think about playing mono green in Pioneer and like having literally, it was like one Discord call with Mason and Jesse Robkin where I was getting talked through how to do the combo on Moto, and like after that being able to just do it, like doing it in paper 2 times and then being like, oh, like actually now I understand 6 more things about this deck, and like I can play it much better, and I can make sure to not make the mistakes that I see others make, or, you know, capitalize on the mistakes I see my opponents make in those same matchups. Likewise to any of the decks that I played. So yeah, those are my I think my 2 biggest strengths, and those are the ones for this inventory that I brought.
Yeah, I do. You know, I think you're really good at kind of like once you're kind of shown something, you're really good at like taking that information and being like, and like you said, like, oh, now that I've done this, this and this are true, whether it's positive or negative, right? You're like, oh, this is another strength of this that maybe we didn't even think about, or like this is the way I could fight through this, right? Like I think you're really good at like being described a picture and then kind of filling it all in, if that makes sense, right?
You're good at mapping, right? Like you map it out after the initial picture is shown.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's snake draft this here, Abe. What are some of your things that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so some things that are in my on the top of my priority list right now are drafting, which is funny because I think this is something that actually a few years ago I described as being one of my strengths. Historically, I've been a very strong limited player, but I think I've mentioned this after PT Vegas, but my last 3 Pro Tour draft pods, I have gone 1 and 2, which I mean, I think even at Pro Tour Final Fantasy, I liked my decks. I felt good about how I drafted. I think a part of that is maybe not drafting so much as just playing extremely tight, like my limited play. But I think my limited play has just not gotten me the results that I've wanted it, especially at that level. And so that's an area that I want to kind of renew focusing on. And even I felt it a bit in like the start of formats or as formats mature. I don't necessarily use as many of the tools as I know others do between 17 lands or like content and things like that to really try to excel at draft formats in the way that that I had in the past. So that's one thing I'm definitely working on. Um,
Yeah, just really
the
quickly, I'd love to hop in really quick and just like highlight for listeners how like this list is ever evolving, right? Like Abe just said, I felt good about this in the past, but it's not where I want it to be. And sometimes that means your bar is raised and you readjust. And so I just really wanted to highlight that and really like give big props to that.
I also want to jump in and just say, like, this is a constructed podcast. We talk about like constructed and constructed Magic, but the point of this podcast is always improving. And what Abe is saying here is like, hey, like I've been to the Pro Tour, what is it, 3 times in the last 5 years, and like I'm not happy with my results. And the reason I'm not happy with my results is my drafts, and like adjusting from there. And that's funny if you're a listener of the podcast, because Abe, you tout draft as the best way to learn the basics of combat and all that stuff. So like, you're putting your foot down and saying like, hey, I'm not doing the work I preach.
Yeah, I mean it's just there's so much to do, and I think that it's something that as I've focused in other areas, I don't put as many hours into it as I used to, and just don't get as intense about it as I used to. And that's something that I know if I want to have the success that I want, I need to make good on. Because even a really good like constructed deck at the Pro Tour, I would be over the moon to get 7 wins with it, meaning that I have to get 5 wins and draft top 8. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just so much that like it can't be something that I'm leaving by the wayside and not continuing to do maintenance on.
Yeah, having that high standard for yourself is so important if you want to play PTs.
Yeah. The next one on my list is updating my priors during games. I think this also applies like outside of games. There are a lot of times where, as much as I just talked about how I think I'm really good at identifying and understanding like what matchups are about and what games are about, there are a lot of times where that will change or that will shift based on what my opponent's doing or my opponent is setting up to do. And sometimes it takes me a bit of time because I'm not taking the time to reflect and think about what I know already or what I think I know already and what that means for the course of the game, to then like stop myself from getting taken for their ride. Like if my opponent is trying to maneuver the game in a way, or if I feel like the way that they're going to have to play the game is one way and they're actually thinking of another, oftentimes I might find myself not really catching on as fast as I should, and being a turn or two behind, and maybe even like costing myself life or cards in fights that I should have picked earlier or should not have picked at all and waited till later, which is like, it kind of leads towards some of my, I mean, maybe my most memorable losses for me are just like ones where had I, for one reason, I mean, it's always like, had I slowed down and thought about it, I would have made the right play and not lost. But even more so, just like, had I thought about what I already knew that was not true, or like, had I forgotten that and reevaluated and just changed the way I was thinking about what mattered, as opposed to just running with the assumption I had made or with the conclusion I came to a turn or 2 turns prior, updating things on that level would give me a lot more clarity. So that's something that I can work on.
I think that for what it's worth, this is something that everybody can work on, because you buy a sideboard plan, right? Like, and you are playing a matchup, and then they do not board the way that the matchup chart says, right? You have to then know, hey, I need to change from here. Like, this is not what they're doing. Sorry, Mason's gonna throw me under the bus here. I don't know the name of the card, but like, I actually had a match today where blue black mid range brought in the 5-mana wrath that like makes the opponent lose life equal to the number of creatures they control. I cannot find it. I looked before this, but they clearly had a lot of them because they they did me 3 turns in a row for blue black mid range. Like they were like, all right, we're gonna just like literally try to run out the VV deck out of resources, and it was very interesting, and it was very different than what like you would typically do, because most of the time you would try to win the matchup through something like Riddler. So you know, stuff changes.
Yeah, I think that, like, yeah, and sometimes maybe been able to tell that that was going to happen to you if you think about what their plays are before. And I think that's also such an important thing about VOD review. Like it's such a big part of, I think, most successful processes, because they, like, when you do that, you have the opportunity to think about what did, like, really stop and think, what did that tell you every turn? And then, you know, when should I have known that this was going to happen? Was there a way, now that I know this is how it's going to play out, looking at that game in retrospect with all of it playing forward, could I have ever known and not felt so caught off guard or not lost the plot in that way? Another thing that VOD really helps with is my last one, which is just taking the time to find the best line every time, as opposed to not just finding like a line I think is really good. Oftentimes, the way that I will play when I'm testing, and also that winds up putting into tournaments, but like there are a lot of times where I will play where and part of it's because of time constraints or like attention constraints, especially in tournaments, it's time constraints. Like not being able to stop and really think through what is the absolute best outcome. Like, can I kill them this turn is a very simple one. That's one that comes up a lot, I think, with Amulet, as like, and especially talking to Amulet players who are like, yeah, I guess I could have killed them and played around 5 things instead of 4 things. Or like, maybe I could have killed them, but instead I just put them in a position where they have to have exactly this combination of 2 or 3 cards in order to not die the next turn. And then I didn't have it and I killed them the next turn, so it worked out. But just doing that more often and really practicing not accepting a really, really strong outcome when I might have a better outcome on the table, because even if you make the second best play every time when it's close, like there are a lot of matches you lose because you didn't make that best play, and leaving those points of equity on the table is just not something that you can do and succeed at the highest level in the way that I hope to. So that's one that I definitely am focusing on and prioritizing, putting more time into, because I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses I have. I mean, even I was playing matches last night in preparation for the Spotlight in Baltimore, and like there were, I think, 2 or 3 times where I kind of made a play that I thought was really good and talked through it and was like, okay, I think this is what I think my opponent has, and this is what I think I'm going to do. And then like someone watching to stop me went, okay, well, what if instead of doing that, because you think they have this, like, does it even matter that they have this or don't have this? If you just do this instead, then you're covered through them having it, them like you being right, you being wrong, and them having 2 things. So it was
Are you playing VV?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that actually crazy hard.
Yeah, it is. I think that like, but I think also like the deck is so powerful that you can get a lot of match points just by making the second or third best play, right? There's a lot of games.
We're gonna get into this during mine.
yeah. It doesn't feel like it changes a ton, but it's still really important to do, and you know, the more that I can make that best play, the better a player I'm going to be. That's just how it works.
Yeah, I think you hit on something I want to talk about later in the show when it comes to VOD review. But like, I think an important thing to highlight here is, I mean, one, I think this is a great one to really focus on, and is once again like that high standard I talked about before is one of your goals, right? Like you have to hold yourself to these high bars if you want to play at these high level tournaments consistently, right? There's no getting around it. But even just looking at games, like the point of games is to create questions or hopefully maybe find an answer to questions. That's the only reason we play these games before the tournament, right? Abe, you could lose every match with VV Cauldron before, like for the next week before the event. I bet you're going to lock in VV Cauldron still, right? It's
That was
not going
literally
to.
my testing process for Breach. Was I lost every. I could not win matches on Moto for the life of me. I was like, this deck is busted. I just have to.
Yeah, and like we're playing these games to like not to win, or winning and losing doesn't matter. I don't care if you're coming to me and you're like 15-1. What I care about is like what have you learned, right? And like what did you get from this session? And what are you like thinking about? And VOD review is a great way to spend some time where it's like, okay, there's no clock pressure on me. I'm pretty sure I could have won this game, or maybe I think I made some really big mistake, but I'm not sure where it was. And watching back, you can then sort of try to find that. The point of the VOD review is not to figure out how you could have won the game. It is to improve at Magic, and you have a real sort of puzzle in front of you to solve. That's
Check
the
out
point
Mason's
of
Twitter today as the time of the recording for this exact tweet.
Yeah, it's important. It's been coming up a lot. Spencer, what about you?
I'm going to go in reverse order because I'm going to go with the one that I talked about. Like, I'm really bad at looking at a deck and understanding it at the first glance. And to be honest, like, this is not to my other weakness in combo decks that we'll get into in a second, but like, I don't understand any interactions or anything. Like, I have to play the deck. I have to do this. It is a weakness of mine, and like I've worked on it. Like I've sat down and talked about decks with people and things like that. But it's something that I got to work on a lot more of, like being able to sit down and understand something. I think that the basic of this is like, I looked at a list of Tron before the Pro Tour, and did not understand why we were playing the 3-man Tezzeret. None of them played at the Pro Tour, so this isn't important to the Pro Tour, but like, it was like, why are we doing this? And they were actually just extra Chalice of the Voids at 3. And I could not understand that. I was like, why are we playing this card? It doesn't make sense to me. And I had to have somebody explain to me, like, oh, you're just playing them because they're extra chalices plus maybe a good card other places that do other things. And I could not understand that. And I'm not good at that. Like, I need to work on that.
Something that Zach Hall, I think it was, talked about was that one of his favorite exercises before like a big tournament was always to just take his deck with his team or whoever he prepared with and just lay it all out face up on the table and go over every interaction in the deck. Like, so, every stupid corner case you could think of between like, oh, if I do this and this, then I can make this happen.
So,
and really just like brute force talking through everything it could possibly do. I don't know if it's something you've ever tried.
Dude, I not only have I tried it, we did it with 10 decks for Pro Tour. I don't know. It was one of the it was Pro Tour Hawaii. I don't know what the Pro Tour was. Where Danny and I think all 3 of them day 2'd that Pro Tour. All 3 of our team day 2'd that Pro Tour. That was really great. Like, maybe it was Ether Revolt. I don't know.
I think that was Kaladesh.
Was it Kaladesh?
Yeah.
Ooh, there you go. You know. And that was really good. That's the type of thing I need. Like, I need that type of like team interaction in a lot of ways. Because I'm not good at, like, I understand the basics of my deck and how my deck works, and like, but that's after I play it and like after I've had some games. But what I'm really bad at is like looking at a deck and being like, oh, this card stacks to this card, which makes this card work. That type of stuff. I don't see that. Which, you know, oh, I was just gonna say, Yeoman's really good at. Like, if you want to look at somebody that's really good at this, you want to look at Yeoman articles. He does this really well.
Yeah, one thing I tell people in coaching that might be helpful for you, Spencer, is like, if you struggle with this skill, literally just do it like in the most blunt way possible, right? Where it's like, look at a card like Tezzeret, for example, and be like, okay, what is every card in this deck that interacts with this card?
Yeah.
Okay, why would that matter? And then like go down the list, and then if you need to, do it for the opponent too, right? Where it's like, okay, we have more chalices. Why on earth would I want more chalices? And then you go and look at goldfish and you're like, well, you know what? That's either a really good reason or maybe a really bad, you know what I mean? And I seriously, just like, there's nothing wrong with just kind of taking it a step at a time, but yeah, I think that's a great one.
My other one that's like my biggest one, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but like, I don't enjoy classic combo, I should say. Like, I enjoy combo decks. I don't enjoy like classic, like all-in combo. Like, there was a moment before the Pro Tour where like Matt was trying to get me to play leagues with him. He's like, hey, what do you think about playing this or that? And I was like, hey, listen, I'll play everything except for these two decks. And they were just both all-in combo decks. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not interested. And I do think it's a weakness of mine. Like, not only do I, what's funny is like, I actually have a positive win percentage against Storm in Modern, Ruby Storm, because I understand the deck, because I understand the interaction points. But I don't look at a deck that's like all in and then want to do it. I don't see it. It's not like the type of Magic I want to play. And I do think it's a weakness of mine. Like, I could spend, Abe and Mason have both spoke poetically about my ability to learn aggro on this podcast and the way that I dedicated myself to do it. I could do that for these combo decks, and I should. And I think that that's the thing, is like understanding the combo plans of those type of decks would help me. And in all honesty, I think the way that I should do that, despite what Mason might say, is like maybe play Legacy, like just play a bunch of Legacy.
So often, Spencer, you say despite what Mason would say, and it's not what I would say. It makes me think that you don't know me.
Maybe I don't. Should I play some Legacy, Mason?
Well, I mean, I just think that like, if you, first off, I think you've correctly identified a weakness, right? Like, you should be willing to play anything, assuming that, winning is your main goal, right? And if it's not your main goal at the time, then everything changes, right? But we always operate with that here. And like, if that's the case and you think that like, you're bad at these things, then you should just try to find the fun in those sort of things, because clearly winning isn't enough to motivate you, right? And so now it's like, oh, okay, where's the fun in this archetype, and how can I derive joy, and then backward engineer that into other.
Well, hold on. I actually disagree with this. So I'm gonna use Neo Brand as an example. I just don't think Neo Brand is good.
But that's not the conversation. The conversation is
no.
Not if Neo Brand is good.
But that is the conversation to me. Like, if you convinced me that, sorry, I'm not trying to derail this. If you convinced me that Ruby Storm was the best deck in Modern, I would play it. I don't know that you could convince me that Neo Brand was the best deck in Modern until it happened. And I think that we've seen this through history with like Hogak, with other decks. Like, these are just not the type of decks that I understand. And I think that my improvement here is to understand the decks, not to learn to play them.
But isn't the best way to understand them to learn to play them?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, and also you're saying you don't find them, like, you're saying you don't you mentioned part of it is you don't enjoy them, right? And so and maybe I misunderstood this, so let me clarify part of what I'm hearing. I don't enjoy all-in combo, so if the choice is close, I'm always going to naturally bias against it, which might bite me in the butt.
That's true.
Yeah, and so that to me is sort of like, if let's just pretend for the sake of argument that I donate a bunch of money to charity and I force you to play Neo Brand. It turns out it's a deck you actually enjoy, right? Like game 20 it connects. Well, maybe Neo Brand isn't a good choice for you to be playing for the tournaments. I agree with that, right? Like objectively, but there might be a time where it turns out to be quite good.
Sure.
Right. And now you're like, ooh, I know that actually I do enjoy this and it's not gonna be miserable. So when it's close, like, I'm not willing to give up that 1 percentage point, you know what I mean, to go the other direction, because I do find fun in this. I've said on the podcast many times, if it's a percentage point between the two decks, I'm often going to go for the one I enjoy a bit more, right? Like in a healthy open format. It's when things aren't healthy and open where it differs. So I think play Legacy. If you think that's going to help you, go in, dog. You know what I mean? Like, try to find the fun in these sort of archetypes.
Play some Belchers. Play some Oops All spells.
Yeah.
Go all in.
I actually
Oops, all
have,
spells
I
pop up.
actually have owned Oops All Spells. Like I played that deck a lot.
That deck's really fun.
Yeah, it's also really good.
Yeah,
My
it's
last,
really good.
it's really good.
Yeah.
I've actually played that in Legacy right now. My last one is one that ties into our last segment, which is I don't know if it's, I think this is all Magic players for what it's worth. But I really struggle with mulliganing with hands with really good decks. Like, I feel like I let the deck carry me way too hard sometimes after X number of games. And I noticed this with VV today, where it's like, dude, I'm keeping hands that there's no way I would keep if I was playing any other deck. There's not a chance I would keep this. Why am I keeping this? And I noticed that today and was like, okay, this is stupid. Like, why am I doing this? And it's because the deck is so much better than every other deck that I'm just keeping nonsense. And I think that that's a weakness of my, like, I just let the best deck do the best deck thing and just keep.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is just because I especially with BB Cauldron had a similar experience where I noticed I was keeping very subpar hands. And it might be a boomer mentality thing, so I'm gonna throw it out that it might be. Is that back in the day when you played the best deck, your deck would bail you out because the game would go long and your cards were better. Your deck is the best deck because you just destroy the game in the first 3 turns. Like, it is just not close after turn 4 if your deck does what it's built to do. So if you don't,
but it also goes long.
But you, right? So it also goes long no matter what. But what, like, your deck is busted because you'll mull to 4 and go like, oh, I played a FOMO and discarded a VV, and here's a Cauldron and a Winter Night Stories. And now in that was a Profts with my extra mana and a land. So now this thing's like, oh, and I have Delirium accidentally.
Totally
take
agree.
12. And you're like, oh, maybe I should just mulligan to the hand that does that instead of going turn 2 Quantum Riddler. And then I'm like, oh, wow, now I win like 12% more matches because I'm not just doing nothing on turn 2, but casting Quantum Riddler on Warp. And that's from personal experience.
Just
I'm
listen to it.
putting that out there.
Just listen to it. Like, I realized, I was like, why am I keeping this hand? This hand has like a 1-drop into a Quantum Riddler that has nothing to impact my Mako. Like, what am I doing? And I was like, I'm keeping bad hands. Like, there's no way this
Make
hand
it
is...
prove to you it's the best deck. You got to be a little skeptical. You got to be like, should I be playing something else? Should I be playing something else? And then it's like, no, you shouldn't. Here,
no, but
go have it. Here's a win. Take it. And you're like, oh, you're good.
Sorry.
No, I know. I think that's really good, and I think that's a great one, Spencer. I also think like this dovetails into a perfect like example for the listener at home. And sometimes you realize one thing, which like they cascade on things to work on, or maybe things you're good at, right? Maybe Spencer's really, like he struggles to keep strong hands on the mulligan, but then is really good at sequencing, right? As an example, if he was doing this by himself. Another one might be maybe Spencer isn't fully locking in before the game starts, quote unquote, with the mulligans. Right. And then like when the game starts, Spencer's locked, but he's like maybe a little looser beforehand. Right. Like, I'm not saying that is the case, more just like a hypothetical for listeners at home, Spencer.
I think it's a combination of everything. Like, it almost feels like I don't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what happens what I do in the pregame because like the deck is so strong.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, well, that's not going to be true in like the hardest matches. Right. So like, it doesn't help me to not practice the disciplined things.
Mm-hmm. And those are the fun parts, right? Like that's what you like is like kind of putting your best self and competing, right? So it's like not only you robbing yourself, you're robbing your opponent a little bit too. So
I agree. Yeah, and this is not the only deck that I found this with. Like, I find this is something that really helped me improve with Tron, for example. When I was like, I would just mulligan to the best available hand rather than the first playable hand. And, when your deck is that powerful on the turns that it's powerful on, that's just what you got to do. So, It's something that I know is a weakness of mine that I can adjust once I see it, but I think that I need to get better at seeing it first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. For my own, so I put playing limited here, and I have in parentheses improving. Like I am playing more limited than I was a year ago, right? And so I've been talking to the podcast. I played a lot of Final Fantasy. That set rules. And I wish Spider-Man ruled. I love Spider-Man. I wish Spider-Man was a tenth as good as Final Fantasy. I would go ham. But I've been playing more limited and really trying to improve at that and get better and spend some dedicated time with each set playing limited. And I put this one here, one, because I think it's a big one for me, but two, I think it's also important sometimes when you're doing these things to take note that like you're on the right direction of where you want to be going with your like things you're working on. And so that's why I put in parentheses improving. I am better at this than I was 9 months ago or whatever, but I don't feel like I'm at the level where I want to be with it yet, nor do I feel like my limited play, which is like a ramification and like an offshoot of this one, is anywhere close to where I want to be. I'm getting better at engaging with limited and finding the fun, but I'm definitely not there like my level of play.
I do think that you lost some time with Spider-Man, and I don't think that it's your fault. I played some, I don't know what the Spider-Man set's called on Arena, and it actually became hard to get drafts and stuff like that. And I know from talking to you personally that like this is something that you care about and you're working on. So I really like that you put that you're getting better at it too. So you're not only noticing that you're not as good as you want, but you're also noticing your improvement.
Yeah, I actually think like a good example if you're struggling with this at home is like on your weight loss journey, at some point you're going to be 25 pounds from where you want to be. And if it's a long journey, that might be really frustrating, not already there, but it's also important to note like, oh dang, I've lost 45 pounds, let's say, right? Like that, you're on the right track, you're doing the right things. Also, if that set just had Spider-Man pictures online on Arena, it would have got a couple bucks from me. Anyways,
it's because they didn't have the wall, Mason.
They didn't have the wall, the best Spider-Man villain.
Dude,
oh
Spider-Man is my favorite superhero. The fact that I didn't get a draft at him on Arena is like
Spencer, do you know the wall, the best Spider-Man villain of all time? You can't crawl me as his tagline.
Oh, that's
and he's
great.
The wall.
That's great.
he's a one-off like Spider-Man villain who's
I feel like this is like an internal Discord thing between you two.
No, it's because I brought it up to Abe one time that like
when it was announced, Mason was like, I hope they really go deep. I want to see the card for the wall. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about because I don't know anything about Spider-Man. And then he sent me his hour-long video essay on the wall, which I did not watch.
I'll give a deep dive really quick. When I was arrested for beating up a police officer as a 17-year-old, the first thing that I did was read a comic book that was Iron Man hooking up with Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, and it like changed me like in the detention center. So yeah.
All right, if you're a patron of the show, this video essay has been linked in general and it'll all make sense.
No, it won't. It won't make any sense. I gotta look up the wall later.
It's in general. I linked the hour-long video. I haven't saved.
Oh, you already did it. Did it.
I put it in general while you were talking. Here's one wall you'll never crawl is the tagline. You have to admit that like Shakespeare hasn't said a word since that was written. Like he has been silent.
That's true. I think that Shakespeare has not said a word since that was written, Mason. I think you're right.
That's right. Yeah. I'm just saying that people are noticing Shakespeare. You better wake up. Anyways, next up on mine is sort of giving it my all the time. This is something that I felt like I'd actually improved at a while ago. I think I even talked about on the show in an Always Improving segment. And I think I've relapsed on this. And that's why I wanted to highlight this one is because, like I said earlier with some of the other ones, this is a constant struggle, right? Like one of the great things about Magic is and lots of things, it's like the eternal climb and like you have to always put your best self. And anytime you don't, it doesn't matter if you're Javier Dominguez, me or you might lose, right? And I love that we all have to kind of put our best self. And I have not been doing that and giving it my all the time when I play. And I caught myself slipping a little bit in the team tournament and I was like so far ahead against this Chrysalis deck and Pauper, and my opponent was just stuck on lands, and I had 7 cards in hand. I just countered a spell I didn't need to. And I put myself in a position where they could have maybe actually got back into it, and I should have just let my guys die. You know, it was a Wrath, didn't really matter. Actually, I only had a couple dudes, but I just autopiloted, and I didn't give that opponent my all. And that's something that is unacceptable to me, and it's something that is really important to me, that you give your all the time. And so I have this in my, like, I need to work on it again. It's something that's just too important.
I really love this one, and I also think that it's something that can be pretty internalized, and something that I thought about not that long ago. Actually, thinking about you, Mason, and your talk on this during your Always Improving segment of like dedicated testing, dedicated moments in Magic, and like how I interact with Magic. And this is gonna sound crazy to some people, but it'll actually, like, if I'm like, hey, I'm not giving my all right now, and I notice it, I'll just concede the match. I will just, that this is something I've done the last couple weeks, as I'll just concede. I'm like, you know what? I don't have it in me right now to give my all, and I would rather learn and have more meaningful matches than like win this way or lose this way. So this is something that I think that everybody should do, to the point where like I am on overdrive on this one myself.
And then last but not least is needing the motivation to practice. This is one where I kind of mentioned earlier about, you know, like I said, I have a good practice process and I feel good about it all once I'm like in the streets, but it's getting to the streets that's the hard part sometimes. And often, you know, this is fixed by like me thinking about my job, right? And like part of like, you know, my work is actually getting in there and practicing and knowing things, yada, yada. But I think that at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I just need to be like figuring out better ways to motivate myself that aren't just like your livelihood depends on it, and you like needing to like refine that spark to like just have that, you know, eternal hunger. And like I mentioned this in the podcast a lot, that I'll quit playing when the losses stop hurting, right? Like my team lost at the event I talked about earlier or whatever, and you know, like it still really stung, right? And so to me, it was sort of like, yeah, we keep going, right? And that's just like kind of how it always goes. But I need to keep that practice going, because it's a big part of it. And I don't want to rest on my laurels, and I don't want to be someone who's like, oh, Mason was good, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not playing in events right now because I just can't really play events and do everything I need to do in my life at the moment, you know? And so it's like I want to, when the time comes, be ready to like jump back in the streets and start playing, you know, pro tours again and really making a run at things. But currently it's not in the cards to do that. But I don't want to atrophy to the point that I'm unhappy when that time does come, excuse me. And so I know that's like an internal demon I'm fighting and trying to figure out. It's easy to just call it a day, you know?
Imagine having kids, man.
I would never. Anyways, that is it for the main point of the show and the Fearless Magic inventory. I've said it before when we talk about this episode. It's not just a thing to like get you to engage with the podcast, but seriously, think about like what this is and write it somewhere and share it with somebody. If you don't have anyone to share it with, share with us in the YouTube comments, and then come back and look at it in 6 months, look at it in a year, update it, work towards, you know, being the best version of yourself and putting pen to paper, and be introspective. Be okay being in the uncomfortable, you know, and identifying what the, you know, things you're not good at are, and also identifying your strengths. That is the other part of this coin. I can't tell you all, and I know I mentioned at the top of the show, how many times I've had to pull teeth to get coaching clients to say things that are good about themselves in their Fearless Magic inventory. If you can't do the good parts of this, you are not doing this correctly. And if you can't identify or try to identify the bad parts, you're not doing it correctly. It is all encompassing. You cannot have yin without the yang. It is all there. That is it for the main topic of today's episode. But we do have some more things to talk about today, including our Patreon question. If you want to support the show, you go to patreon.com/ccmtg like Drew and Micah, excuse me, misread that there, did this last week. And this week's patron question comes from Yan Monster. Yan says, what do you do when you realize you have a specific tick while playing and it starts to annoy even you? Spencer, I'm going to throw this one to you because you mentioned before the show how you used to have a tick that would, kind of show its head and then you work through it.
Yeah. I a long time ago, during like the old days of PPTQs, apparently I had a tick where if I drew an excess land around like 8, 9, 10, I would shake my head. And one of my teammates mentioned this to me, and it was something that I really had to work on. It's really funny now because like one of the ways that I worked on it is like if I draw an excess land that I am going to play immediately, I'll be like, deck, and I'll like do it to like pretend like I'm flooded or things like that. But really working on how I interact with the top of my deck and my poker face. I actually think that I usually have a pretty good poker face of like during the turn, during the interaction, things like that. But apparently I would just shake my head. And it's something that I had to physically be like, check my draw step and not react to for a long time. I think that if that's what you mean by a tick, that's one thing. If what you mean by a tick is like shuffling your cards or in your hand or like like moving your water bottle or your stuff, like there are other ways to deal with that, but like if it's in-game stuff that like affects your game, I would recommend like sitting down and going through your process of like how you play through your turn. One of the people that I really respect mechanically is actually Abe Stein. He's this Magic player that I watched at an RC that when I told him how beautiful his turns were, I think that he glowed like an angel because he worked on it so hard. But if that is where your stuff is going, you might want to talk to him about it.
Yeah, that guy's probably right. I'll I'll say that if you, let's say it's not a tell, like Spencer's saying, or like it's not something that's like something that's a tick that's triggered by like an event happening in game. But regardless, I think that just taking the time to practice doing things another way and just being intentional about how you want to do them is the best way to overcome that. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty particular about like how I lay out my board state and how I draw my cards and how I play my turns. Like I try to be very very fluid in how I maintain things, and there are some things that I do that are like habitual or subconscious. Mason actually mentions this sometimes whenever he's talking about like me being on coverage, is that I have this habit that I actually picked up from watching Pro Tour coverage of setting my hand face down. Especially when I have like 3 to 4 cards, or like usually like 3, 2, or 1 card, like just drawing it, knowing what it is, and then just like setting them down and knowing where they are on the table is something that I will do. And like,
is that where I learned that?
I don't know. I do that because I watched someone do it. I watched someone do it at a Pro Tour. Yeah,
I lay out my hand in a feature match. I never realized where I learned that from.
I only do it with like certain low numbers of cards. Otherwise, I usually keep them in my hand. But anyway, like these are all things that I'm telling you about that are very specific that you would never think of unless you were really thinking about how you're actually doing things. And I think that if you just give some intentionality to breaking the habit, that can help. I also, I don't know, it's something I think about sometimes because I have a friend who recently fell into a rabbit hole of like Twitch streamers who are magicians. But like there are so many things in performance that are just actually rehearsing, and especially Magic is like actually rehearsing the stupidest movements possible just to be able to do them on command. And so like, you can learn to do things a different way, and like to do things in a way that feels fluid or feels better, or like unlearn how you're doing things now just by getting in the practice of it. Like, I mean, even shuffling a deck of cards is something that most people you encounter on the street would not know how to do. And I think that as Magic players, we probably all don't appreciate that, because we shuffle cards so much. But like, if you're tired of the way that you shuffle cards in your hand or whatever, like you can find another way to handle it. You just have to give it some intentionality. Mason,
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think that those are all really good. Honestly, this feels like a spot where I'm weirdly not prepared for. So I'm glad Yan brought it to the podcast and not to coaching, where I don't really know what I would do in this kind of spot. I don't have anything that like. I mean, I shuffle my cards in my hand, which I know does annoy some people, and if they express that to me, I stop or whatever. But yeah, I don't really have anything like this. I don't really know. So listening to you all talk about it, I think was definitely really informative to me. If it ever comes up again, I'll probably be echoing that.
Your ticket's just being too beautiful, Mason.
Yeah, honestly, if I have a ticket, it's just being too hilarious at the table.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Yan, for that question, and to all our patrons helping support the show. You can check out our sponsors, untap.gg, to have an arena deck tracker. Keeps all your decks up on the side. One of my friends from League Coaching is actually getting into Magic, and I had him go and download this with our link. So, a little insider there, but he's new to it, and having the cards up on his screen has just been so helpful for him, where he's like, oh, what did I draft this game, or what have I played, or what have I seen from them? And just being able to see this is such a great tool early on for all of that. And then also you can check out Man Traders and use code CCMTG8 to get a discount on your first couple months of Man Traders. If you are playing Magic Online and you're not using Man Traders, you're doing it wrong. Check them out. It is a card rental service. It is the best way to play online. Some of those cards get preposterously expensive, and Man Traders eases that load. Let's move on to always improving. That is the main point of the show. Spencer, you were out last week. So what's your always improving moment this week?
Yeah, I mean, I was out last week to work on my mental health. I won't get too far into it. If you want to know, like, you can go to the Patreon. I did share it with the patrons, but I think that the thing that I did the last couple weeks is put process to myself of like my day-to-day life, my mental health, and like making sure that I'm accomplishing something and doing something. I know that that some listeners don't like it when I talk about my mental health on this segment, so unplug your headphones. But I do think it's important to like say, like, sometimes you're not at your best, and the last couple of weeks I was not, and I really focused on like trying to be process oriented in my life and building towards accomplishing things, and that included Magic for a lot of it. Like, how do I include Magic while I do this? How do I include this video game that I want to play? Like, how do I do this? And like really being thoughtful. And I have a 4-year-old daughter that I take care of every day while I don't have a job, and she can't just sit there and do nothing. Like, she has to go outside. Like, she has to do stuff. She has to be a part of the world in a lot of ways, and trying to understand that has been something that I dealt with. And to be more specific, I really am trying to sleep less. It's really easy to sleep through your day when you're sad, or you have anxiety, or you have depression, and that's something that I'm trying to work on. So
that's a great one. Abe, what about you?
Yeah, last week I kind of talked about testing process, especially with the group that I had, but I also it's part of why I really love the Fearless Magic Inventory episodes. I think they just like it shows the value of sharing, because when you do share, you get to like get perspectives from the outside and understand that you're really not alone in some things you struggled with. Like Spencer bringing up having like the same kind of experience I had with VV Cauldron of like keeping hands that were not hands you really should keep with the deck because they looked fine, and not really pushing deck. Like that was something I really worked on this week. I actually did that by saying, you know, in my downtime when I don't have someone to jam against me in a matchup, like I'm just going to ladder on Arena, just to effectively do some stronger gold fishing of the deck, and get some chances to see how certain sideboard planes map and impressions of cards. And in that, not only did I like just play the matches, which normally I do, but I decided to make sure to actually record my you know, all of my wins and losses, you know, whether I was in the play or the draw, the matchup, and like just kept that in a running notepad, to then later upload into
I need
and we
to
were
get,
sharing information.
I need to get you a premium account from our sponsor because they'll just do that for you.
Okay, I mean that'd be cool, but
remind me later, Abe, that that is the thing that our sponsor does that I can get for you.
But yeah, I mean, but also just taking the time to write down like my notes on it and everything about the match, and really just like thinking about it a bit more, making the most of those ladder matches was a big thing I haven't done recently, and actually made the push to Mythic. Finished it last night. It's amazing what you'll be motivated to do when you lose to someone who you never want to lose to. In Jarvis U in this instance, but yeah. So those my
race Jarvis. What's the backstory there? You can't get away with that one.
Oh, I lost to Jarvis in the final. It's embarrassing to say I lost to Jarvis in the finals of an RCQ the other week.
We can cut that. Let's just.
No, I already said it on Blue Sky. We can keep it.
Okay.
I missed a bunch of land drops and died in game 3, and you just don't want to go out that way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Losing to Jarvis specifically, I don't care how many lands I draw, but like you don't, when you feel like you deserve having someone's number, you feel like you've earned it over the years. You got to have someone you're really picking the wins against. So taking that L, it was like I got to get back in the streets, back in the rabbit hole, and
it'd be like Oregon losing to Indiana. It would just be rough.
It's just not right.
Yeah.
Football.
Football.
I'm part of the boys. I'm part of the gang. I pick it up what y'all are saying. My always spring moment actually comes from when I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show about VOD review and kind of realizing that some of the clients just weren't getting it. And this basically came from a client pushing back the VOD review was helpful. They're like, hey, like, you know, I trust you, obviously, blah, blah, blah. But like, man, VOD review just isn't actually helpful. And I was like, okay, what is your thoughts on this? You know, like, let's have a conversation. You know, I obviously, I'm diametrically opposed to you, but let's try and be in the middle. Let's understand things. And we were talking, and what we got to was he was thinking that the point of VOD review was to figure out how he could have won the game. And he kept saying things like, well, if I draw 9 lands, who cares? You know, if I draw no lands, how am I supposed to win? And it's like, that's not the point. The point is, what are the decisions we made? How could we go through this, right? And at the end of it, he's like, I was thinking about this all wrong. I'm gonna come in with a new slate and try it this way and focus less on winning and more on how do I get better at playing Magic and using my past games as a way to learn and improve and do that. That isn't just simply playing games and look for mistakes and look for weaknesses in myself. And understanding this, that like, this is a thing where I've been preaching this for years now, that you should be doing more VOD review, but I haven't maybe been doing the best way of saying it to others. And the realization that I kind of had is I need to make sure that this the concepts I'm trying to kind of shotgun out on the podcast or coverage or whatever it is, or directly in coaching, I need to make sure they land and that, you know, people are sort of getting them when I'm speaking in these general ways, because I'm sure there's other people out there who this is an aha moment to them. Right? They're like, oh, I maybe have been doing this wrong. Or maybe I've been, you know, taking the wrong approach towards VOD reviewing. And now you can go into it with like, you know, kind of the right mindset that, you know, we're not trying to figure out how we could have won 100% of our games. We're trying to figure out how we could have improved our game. What could I have done better? What did I do wrong? Etc.
Abe, have you ever made a play where you made the play and then immediately was like, oh, I should have done this?
Only every day.
That's VOD reviewing.
Only all the time. Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. As someone who understands that you cannot win 100% of your games, it makes sense to never think about it as like, how could I win how could I win this exact game I played? Like that's just not possible to do every time. But a lot of people, I mean, that's something I kind of remember is like many people do play Magic with the idea that they should or can win every single game that's in front of them, which is not to say you should not try, and there's not a way to have a better chance of winning, but like, it's about finding that best chance of winning, not about 100% win rate, which is not possible.
Definitely. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the show. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to support the show, once again, you go to patreon.com/CMTG. You can also just like and share the show with your friends. Doesn't have to be social media. Just tell about them if you think it would be helpful for them. If you want to find the show, you can find us anywhere online with @CCMTG or Constructed Criticism on youtube.com. If you want to find me, you can reach out to me via Twitter @MasonEClark, twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. And if you want to get coaching, you can do that via DMs there or emailing me MasonEClark@gmail.com. I'm doing some CubeCon coverage this Friday. If you want to check out some of that, me and Ross Merriam, round 1. We're doing a cool cube. It's going to be awesome. Check it out. Spencer, if someone can find you, where do they go?
Yeah, you can find me at Spencer13H on Blue Sky or most places, or He's a Game is my other handle. Kind of looking for a new way to record Constructed Clash on this YouTube channel because of other stuff. You can find me on Need to Nerd, weekly podcast about nerd culture. What about you, Abe?
You can find me over at Blue Sky at More Nothings, or Twitter at More Nothings. And if you're interested in coaching, you can reach out to me via DM on another platform or send me an email. Just put coaching in the description at morenothings@gmail.com.
Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you all next week for another episode of CCMTG.